I'm going to call the meeting to order at 5:08. Today is Thursday, December 7th, and today is actually a special meeting. Roll call. I'm present, Tammy Dela Cruz. Who else is present? Anybody other than, so Malaya Coleman is not present. Scott Erickson will not be attending. We got notification of that. Chief Fusaro.
Present.
Randall Ortega, we got communication that he will not be attending. We got communication that Dana Parfit would not be attending, and Kathy Velez is she present? Not present. Okay, that means that we do not have a quorum. So we will just would not be able to do any business as far as doing any voting. So we will just probably go right to educational stuff and go right to new business, and I'll hand it over to the chief.
The first item that we have, microphone here for temporal. The first item, I'd invite Deputy Chief Gately to come up. He's just going to give us a quick overview of accreditation. Two different types. He's really been working a lot on this. We recently received our POST, which is the Police Officer Standards and Training Council here in Connecticut accreditation. And next week we have a major event. And I'd like him to just give a little bit of overview of each of them and what it means to the department and to the town.
Hi. Just a quick overview. As the chief mentioned, we have been in the process for POST accreditation. That's Police Officer Standards and Training Council here in the state of Connecticut. There is a requirement that all departments become accredited through POST by 2026, and there are several different tiers of accreditation. To start off, they're expecting everyone to get tier 1 accredited, and what that's consisting of currently is that all departments have to have policies in place to address a set of standards that have to be met, and they go through, you have to show that you have the policies in place that meet all the standards. They go through and they analyze all of that information to make sure that you do have the policies and they do meet all of those thresholds. And then they come out and they inspect the police department and you achieve tier 1. They have 3 levels, tier 1, 2, 3. And all departments are going to have to meet all those levels. At the same time, we are also in the process of going through accreditation for what's called CALEA. It's the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and it is the pinnacle of accreditation. It's they refer to as the gold standard. It's an international accreditation body, very detailed, very thorough. Currently, we have gone through. For CALEA, it requires not only do you have the policies in place currently, but you have to meet all of those standards and show proof that you have met those standards. So, for example, there's a policy that talks about before any law enforcement officer can assume a role out on the road patrolling, and once they're sworn in, they have to take an oath. And all of our officers do that. When they're sworn in, they have to take an oath. And what we have to show is, hey, we have a written directive that says that all of our officers are expected to take an oath. We have a defined oath that we have them adhere to. They swear to it. They sign off on it. The chief signs off on it when they swear in. And that would be a proof. We would show that we have the policy in place. And hey, here's a proof. Here's an officer from 2022 that swore in that year. And then we have officers from 23. We've had to show proofs since we joined up for CALEA. We had to show proofs for all of 2022 and all of 2023 to currently. We have achieved that. We had to satisfy over 160 standards. I gave you that one example, but a lot of them are very thorough. They have to do with patrol operations, interviews, interrogations, our evidence control is a very big one. There's a whole, as you can imagine, there's 160 plus of them. So there's a whole litany of them. So not only do we have to show that we have the policies in place, we have to show that proof that, hey, we are doing this continuously. We adhere to our policies, which are based on the best standards in law enforcement. So we're in really good shape that way. Like I said, POST came out, they did tier 1 for us and looked at our facility. They were very impressed with our facility and our operations. They were using us as a model agency. She was very commendable, and she was actually said, hey, I want to refer others to you that are in this process should they have any questions they can reach out to you. Me and one of our lieutenants have been acting as assessors for post. So we have been volunteering our time to go through all other different agencies to check their policies, to make sure they adhere to all these standards. And so they've been utilizing us for that too. And it's been very helpful for us too, as we work our way through our own accreditation process to see how it works on all these other different agencies. I'm looking right at you, Tammy, because you're right here. Back to Kalia, they reviewed our entire standard and policies, and as of October 28th, they put us in compliance with all of those standards. So all of the remote process is done. And what I mean by remote, we literally allow them into our system. So the assessors, there's 2 of them, and they spent like 3 or 4 days analyzing all of our policies in depth and all of our proofs. So, and we had to go through, and sometimes they'll find little things that's like, hey, you know, this particular policy says you should do this, but it really, you shall do it. And just the little nuance of having a change in that wording alone, you know, is something that you may have to tweak along the way. And in this process, which is the first time we're going through it, they allow for that. Like, hey, you need to tweak that and make sure that you're doing that. Even though we're doing it, it's that wording. It needs to be, no, you shall do. It's not even no wiggle room. There's no option there. It's a shall. So, as I said, they've gone through the process of the remote inspection. Now we have an on-site inspection coming up next week. So an assessor from Kalia is flying here to Connecticut. He's coming to our facility from this Sunday through Wednesday. And he has certain things, they're called observable standards. So things that he actually physically has to see that we are doing. That's above and beyond just having the policies and adhering to the policies. There's certain things he has to see that we are actually doing at our facility. So he will come out and do all the observable standards. But in addition to that, he speaks to members of the community. He speaks to other department heads. There's a litany of people that he's interested in speaking to and asking them about this police department and how we function, how we interact with our community. Obviously, we're very community policing and outreach is very important to this department. So I'm sure he's going to see a lot of that when he's here, and he can ask any question. He'll go out on ride-alongs with our officers. He'll pick an officer. Hey, I want to go with you out on patrol, and can ask him about the things that he's doing, things that he's encountering, how he handles certain situations. So, you know, it's basically we're under an inspection. He can come and look at whatever he wants and ask questions of our personnel, our command staff, and, you know, he interviews certain people. We've identified like 4 areas of interest that he's going to speak at length to some of our personnel about. One of them is internal affairs operations. That's me. So I will sit down with him and for an allotted time and talk all about our process and how we handle complaints from citizens and how they're investigated by this department. And he's also going to talk about evidence and our use of force and training. And then he's going to talk about community policing with some of our community policing folks. So that's what we have lined up for next week. Pretty excited about it. There's only about 20 departments in the state of Connecticut that have achieved this level of accreditation. It will be beyond what we've had right now for post. It's going to surpass what we've had to show for post, but we will continue along the process. And we have completed, since I've had this project, 124 policies, new policies, out of over 135. We still have some more to go, but as the chief likes to say, this process never ends. It's always going to change. Laws change, techniques, equipment changes. I mean, some of the things that didn't exist when the chief and I started now exist. So there's a lot of rules, regulations, best practices that go along with that, and we will adjust accordingly. We will change our policies when we have to, and we'll continue to plot ahead and make sure that we're doing everything to the best standards possible. So that's kind of accreditation. I'm not sure unless I'm missing anything, Chief. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Again, Madam Chair, you know, it's a big event, not just for the department, for the town. And sorry, just like Deputy Chief Gately, I'm going between the camera and with you. But it's a big accomplishment. It's a lot of work. I really commend Deputy Chief Gately, Lieutenant Minor. We've had Officer Chris Banks and Master Patrol Officer, Evidence Officer, and Court Officer Lori Socia participating in this. They've really done a lot of work. I really appreciate what they're doing and how they've done this.
One thing to add, as we elevate, if we continue along this CALEA path, these standards could more than double in how many we have to do. Right now, we had to satisfy over 160, but that's level law enforcement tier 1 CALEA, which is very in-depth, but they have an advanced level of CALEA. And so if we continue down that road, it's going to be a lot more work and a lot more standards and compliance and all these proofs that we need to show.
So thank you. What I'm going to try and do is share the screen now. I'm not sure how. So on to another item. Again, this is more informational than anything. There's no requirements for us to take any votes on this, but I'll review this just briefly. We post our use of force data on our department website, town's website. It is required by police departments in the state of Connecticut under Connecticut General Statute 7-282 Echo for law enforcement units to report any recorded or any use of force incident that meets the following criteria. And without boring everybody, that's right up there on the screen right now. So these are things that we do a pretty deep analysis on annually. We have a use of force review team that when there is some type of use of force necessitated by an officer responding to a call for service or making an arrest or some other incident where an officer does use force, that is reported through the chain of command. Officers are required to write a full use of force report. It goes to this team of a patrol officer, a lieutenant. Occasionally, they'll bring someone else in to review something, but they do a detailed analysis and they've presented it to this board in the past. We've compiled our data from 2022. Obviously, 2023 isn't quite over yet, but this will be posted on our website, and I think it's important that an explanation goes with it. So this is what we put out there from both Connecticut General Statute as well as the Connecticut Police Officer Standards and Training Council, so that we can provide the public transparency on this and show them what we've had. So this is the information and the criteria that we utilize for this reporting as required under both law and policy, both Police Officer Standards and Training policy and our own department policy, which does comply with the post-C policy. So in 2022, roughly about just under 28,000 calls for service from the police department. Of those calls for service, there are 722 arrests. 10 of those incidents resulted in a reportable use of force under the criteria I just outlined. We did not have any use of force complaints. You can see that on the slide on the left-hand side here. Again, almost 28,000 calls for service where police officers responded. And of those, 10 incidents where there were reportable uses of force. That's less than a half of, as you can see on the bottom there too, of the incidents, 0.036% resulted in a use of force. So that's pretty good. I think that speaks to the training that our officers have been getting. I know that both the council and the RTM have been supportive of our training and recruitment efforts. I think it's good to highlight that because that gives them a sense that, you know, their money is being well spent and it's being used for the things that they want it, which is making sure our officers are trained to the highest standards and that they're complying with the policies and the accreditation standards that Deputy Chief Gately just spoke about. On the right-hand side of the slide from 2022, 4 of those uses of force happened during domestic violence incidents. 1 related from a search warrant for narcotics, 1 from a robbery, an armed robbery, 2 wanted persons during the course of an arrest. 1 was a person that was in a psychiatric emergency, and then 1 for a general disturbance. These are the incidents that I referred to there previously. It may be tough to see on the screen, but it outlines the type of incident, when it happened, what that use of force was. And as you can see in that, the majority of them are either pointing a firearm or pointing a conducted energy weapon, also known as a taser. Those conducted energy weapons have a laser sight on them. It doesn't mean they were deployed. It means it was pulled out, pointed at a subject who complied. So those are the ones there. So it's all pointing a firearm as well as pointing a laser sight from a conducted energy weapon. And it gives a little bit of insight as to what happened, the gender, and if there are any injuries. I'm happy to report there were no injuries as a result of these uses of force. There's a second page for the final three. Again, pointing a firearm under number 10, there was a use of a taser. A conducted energy weapon was used. It was deployed on a male. The male did sustain an injury, and that injury was the result of the probes puncturing that person. And they gained compliance from the subject as a result of the use of that taser. So those are the 10 uses of force. You can see in the third one on this slide, as well as the eighth one, there were multiple subjects. So 10 uses of force. Firearm was pointed at individuals in those incidents. They were one person was a wanted person. Clearly, you can read on the right, but on the bottom there was a taser use, and other individuals complied without the use of a taser, but they were involved in this incident. Madam Chair, you have any questions on these?
Thank you.
And I'll be happy to provide you with hard copies of this if you like. Again, this item is also, this goes into our 2021 uses of force as well. I'll just show those briefly. Again, similar numbers, a little bit more on the calls for service side. We had over 29,637 arrests, but only 7 reportable uses of force. In those cases, 1 was for domestic violence, 3 were during motor vehicle stops, and then 1 for a general disturbance. I'm sorry, 3 for a general disturbance. These are those incidents. Again, very similar. Hi. That's all right. We have another member of the Kathy Velez, one of our members, is here. We do not have a quorum. We're doing a informational meeting, so we're not voting on anything. These are the 2021 uses of force. Again, this stuff is going to be available. If it's not already up there on our website, it will be. But these 7 incidents of reportable uses of force, again, of the same nature. Pointing a laser, there were a couple of, at least 1 use of a conducted energy weapon. You can see on that first one during a domestic, and pointing of firearms. And then what you that there it's important to point out that there was a change during this. So from in 2022, there was an update as to what was reportable and what wasn't. So our data changed somewhat based on the statutory requirements. I just think that's important to point out. And all of this, again, is the slides that you see before you are going to be the ones that are available on our website. So do you have any questions? All right, there's another item I'm going to try and pull up as well. I'm going to have Deputy Chief Gately talk about this a little bit. All right, so these are our complaints from 2022, and I'll turn the podium over to Deputy Chief Gately to give an update on this.
Thank you, Chief. As you may recall, I was looking through some of my notes. I did a presentation last September on the same topic of complaints, citizen complaints. I went over the process and how that takes place here when a citizen makes a complaint, how we process them. They all come through my office. I let the chief know about all the complaints, but I process them through my office, determine what level of a complaint is a citizen just not happy with a motor vehicle stop and how that went, or depending on the nature of the complaint, I assign it to a supervisor to investigate. That could be a sergeant, a lieutenant. and anything of a more serious nature that we would give to one of the captains or myself. Last year, I can't explain the numbering on how many complaints we get. You never know. It just depends. And I say that based on the fact that in 2022, we had 6, which I was glad to see because it's easier on our end when it comes to investigating the complaints. And it's nice to know that, okay, we didn't have that many. But in 2021, we had 10. 2020, we had 16. I like to think on an average, we get 1.5 a month of a complaint from a citizen. But we take all complaints. We take these matters seriously. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We want to analyze how we are out there interacting with the public. And if we make a mistake, we take care of that. We will have training or whatever the case may be. If somebody made a mistake and it's a disciplinary issue, then we'll handle it that way. But I was glad to report that we had 6 last year, and don't ask me. It was a nice drop from what it was the previous year. But this year we're tracking a little higher. We're at about 17 right now. Here it is December. So, but that's just an overview of what we have. You can see what they were about. There's different outcomes depending on what we find with the investigation. But
Oh, I just have a question, like if, just because I see it like repeated a couple times, if you were to see like officer attitude, reported like a few times versus like against the same officer, is that something that you guys would take?
yes, we do track that. Yes, absolutely.
Falls under our policy regarding early warning.
We're not listing all the officers and we're not listing the complainants,
Oh, yeah.
obviously, but yeah, we track all that information. Yes. But I mean, like you can see, sometimes sometimes people have a perception, right? Sometimes people think, hey, this happened to me. And then you actually go and you look at and we have body worn camera footage, which is very helpful in analyzing these things. Sometimes you'll see it's like, well, that's really not what happened if you look at it. And that's not discounting that person's perception. They're in the heat of the moment and they get stopped on the side of the road and it's not an everyday occurrence for them. And they just perceive of what happened to them and they may feel slighted by something when, as it turns out, it's like, well, the officer approached on the passenger side because that's just the technique that we use. And sometimes you're able to explain things to folks and they go, oh, I didn't realize that now it makes sense why he did this, or now it makes sense why this happened. So sometimes that's a good interaction with citizens when you're able to explain why an officer did a certain thing. But sometimes they'll remember something happening. They'll say he was rude or he threatened to arrest me. And I mean, there's a couple on here where a gentleman said that the officer was easily aggravated and you watch the body camera, it's like, where are you seeing that? Because that's not what's happening.
So they are able to view the body camera with you?
No, we're looking at the body cam based on what they have to say about the incident. And you go and look at it. It's like, I don't know how this person came to this conclusion. We always send them a letter as to the outcome of the complaint. Yeah. When we receive a complaint, we send them a letter saying, we have received your complaint. We give them the complaint control number, it's called, that we track them sequentially. We will give them the C number so that they're aware of what it is. I usually tell them, hey, Sergeant so-and-so has been assigned to look into the matter. You can reach him at this number if you have any questions, but he's going to reach out to you, talk to you. And then once the supervisor does the review, they do a report, detailed report, they investigate it. They talk to the officer, they look at body cam footage, whatever other things we have that are available that would help us to resolve the issue and investigate it. And then when it's concluded, we send a letter to the citizen. Hey, this is what we found. And they can certainly reach back out if they have any questions. But for example, the one I said where it's like, hey, he threatened to arrest me, and you look and it's like, there's not one time during that entire event. And I'm looking at the officer involves body cam footage. I'm looking at one of his partners that was there and another person that was there. At no time was that said, right? And we have the event from the beginning to the conclusion, and our officers are walking away, getting in their cars. It's sometimes people have a perception, and I'm not faulting anyone for having a perception, but we figure that in. It's human beings. I mean, sometimes you perceive something happened and it's a little more dramatic than it actually was.
Especially when you're in like a heightened state like that.
Absolutely, sure. So that's just an overview of what we've encountered in 2022. Obviously, 2023 isn't concluded yet, but we're tracking a little bit higher than we did last year. That's kind of the nature. Now, our complaint policy is available online on our website. That is a requirement That is a law that came out in 2014 that requires every police department is supposed to have the complaint policy posted on their website along with the complaint form. So our policy is posted on our website along with the form, both in English and Spanish. All right, unless anyone has any questions, that's kind of an overview of what we're looking at for last year. Okay.
Right. Just a couple of notes on what Deputy Chief Gately mentioned. First, as he did say, we have our complaint policy as well as the form on our website. It does happen, and this is more for the public's sake, it does happen occasionally that individuals will get on the website, they'll see that, and they will think that's a complaint about something else, meaning not a complaint against police officers or a complaint about service delivered. It's about, well, I've had I had an accident and I wasn't able to report it, or there was something that happened, they want to make a criminal complaint or something for us to investigate unrelated to the performance of an officer. They'll sometimes fill that form out erroneously, thinking that generates a criminal complaint, meaning, you know, I've got a credit card fraud or something like that, and they'll send it to us, and I'll usually will come to me and I'll send that out to the on-duty personnel. On another item, and this really addresses one of your questions, we have a early warning and early intervention system, and if multiple uses of force or multiple incidents happen with the same officer, it automatically triggers that. Meaning if, let's say, an officer had a traumatic event that they were involved in, they went to a very serious accident, maybe there was a child hurt, or they're investigating something that could be traumatic in and of itself. And then there's a couple of other incidents. Maybe there's some problems that we identify at work, or there are multiple uses of force. They may all be justified, they all may be reasonable and necessary, but it still triggers this where we have a process where we have to review this, and we also have to meet with the officer, and we've done that. So there are incidents, we do have a policy, and it's one of those requirements under CALEA that we do that. So we have a process in-house that makes sure that that occurs. And another item that was just asked about body-worn camera footage, you know, in many of these cases, people do want to see the body-worn camera footage for a complaint. We will bring them in. Sometimes they've done that where they want to see it. They want to understand that, hey, what really happened. Earlier today, I had that happen where an individual wanted to view body-worn camera footage from an interaction. We certainly accommodated. It is public information, so we make reasonable accommodations for that to happen. In other cases where we've had complaints and body-worn camera footage was available and it substantiated the actions of the officers, in some cases, those individuals haven't wanted to see it. So it happens both ways. So the next item on here is department staffing. Our department's been benefited from some really good officers and civilian staff that have come to us. Recently, we've hired our most recent hire in the civilian staff was an individual who's now part of our records department. So we have a fully staffed civilian support staff, which consists of Jeannie Vislowski, which is my executive assistant, as well as Robert Stroll, who's our police support specialist, Jessica Quattramani and Colleen Quattramani and Jessica Butler, who are our civilian staff in our reports and records. And then we have two community outreach specialists, and I believe you got to meet one of them a few months ago, and that was Lorena Clark, and she's been joined by Maria Knott. Those are our two community outreach specialists who've been doing a considerable amount of work. And I know they've met with you in your other capacity, and they've met with certainly members of the public. Recently, they met with City of Groton personnel to explain what their jobs are and how they could help there as well. So we're very privileged to have them, and they've certainly been an asset to this department. Additional civilian staffing is our telecommunicators. We are currently in a hiring process for telecommunicators. In fact, yesterday I had an interview with someone, and we tendered a conditional offer of employment, and I've got multiple interviews next week. So we are not fully staffed on our dispatch side of the house. We've got 13 positions. Right now we have 9 of them filled, so we're working hard to make sure we get that where it needs to be. We have one vacancy currently in the police department. We have an officer that's in the police academy, the regional police academy, that's being conducted by our Regional Chiefs Association, which is the Law Enforcement Council of Connecticut. Please excuse my back. I'm sorry, I should have said that before. But we have one officer, Cassandra Kelly, who started last Monday at the academy. I understand she's doing well. And we are in the process of interviewing candidates for our one officer vacancy. However, what you may have noticed in the last week is we posted that two of our longstanding officers, Sergeant Van Voorhees and Investigator Banwell, are departing the department. They're retiring this month. So we have two upcoming vacancies that we'll be looking to fill as well. And we do have some candidates in line for those positions. And the last item I do want to bring to your attention when it's about staffing is recently we've reinvigorated our chaplaincy program. We have had a department chaplain for a number of years, going back at least to the 80s, from what I understand. But in more recent times, we've had one chaplain, and that's been Deacon Douglas Hoffman. Deacon Hoffman is a deacon with the Catholic Church, St. Mary's, across the street from the police department. But he's no stranger to this department because he retired as a police sergeant in 2015. But since that time, he's served as our sole chaplain. We've gotten a little bit of help from Father Tom Hoare across the river in Stonington from time to time. But recently, we've benefited from a couple of peoples here in town that are certainly huge resources to us, and that's Pastor John Ludka, who is the founding and senior pastor of the Community Baptist Church of Groton. He's worked with other agencies across the country. Grew up here in New England, but he's been a great find for us. He's someone that we're very privileged to have. He's had a connection with our officers for some time through his church. And we've also got Maria Knott, who I already mentioned her as one of our community outreach specialists, but she's also an ordained chaplain as well. So she's helping out on that front for us as well. And why are chaplains important? A couple of reasons. Number one, they're just one of those mechanisms that we utilize internally when our officers and our personnel and their families may need some support because of the things I mentioned a moment ago, the critical incidents, maybe the unfortunate types of incidents they have to go to and deal with. And it does have an effect on our officers. So as part of our wellness program, they play a really important role. And they're also available for the community. Sometimes we have to deliver bad news to people, and that can be a difficult time. And chaplains have played a big role in that. We've sent them to training. There's a very strong group that really started in Norwich with the Norwich Police Department a number of years ago that has really done a lot of work, and they've kind of led this group across the region. And our folks are now here assigned to us. They're part of our team. They do go out on ride-alongs from time to time, so we're happy to have them. And I believe that is all I have for the items under new business. Anything you need from me, Chairman? Chairperson?
That being said, I think we should probably adjourn because we don't have a quorum. So is that okay with everybody? Is there anything else you additionally would like to add, Chief?
The only other thing, and I know we're not going to vote on it, but
Right.
maybe we can share this with the rest of the committee. It's the proposed dates. And I'm not going to read them off right now just because you haven't had an opportunity to socialize them with the committee.
Right.
But we do have some tentative dates identified for next year. And, we're looking at quarterly meetings throughout the year. But the other point I bring up is one of the reasons why this meeting was held tonight. And unfortunately, a couple of our members had some last minute commitments that they could get out of. But we also, right after this, is the last session of our Citizens Police Academy. They'll be graduating tonight. So I wanted members of this committee to feel welcome at that if they'd like to do it. We're going to do some, they're going to get some training, but we're also going to have a graduation ceremony afterwards, and we're going to get some photos and share some food and soda afterwards as well. So you're invited and welcome to stay.
I will be attending. We will stay.
I don't know if I'll be able to stay.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I'll be staying, so I'm excited. So that being said, we should adjourn.
All right.
5:43.
We are adjourned at 5:43.